So firstly, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who's joining us for the third session on the second day of BigBlueButtonWorld 2022. Secondly, I just want to say a big thank you to Steve Ruiz, who is joining us today, giving his talk on tldraw. Real pleasure to have you here. I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of really insightful and really interesting stuff that you're going to be sharing. So just some quick background on Steve just before we start. So Steve is a London-based developer and interaction designer. So graduating with a master's degree in fine arts from the University of Chicago, Steve has gone on to work on a variety of open source projects, namely Perfect Freehand, Perfect Arrows, State Designer, and finally tldraw. So based on the amazing capabilities of tldraw, the BigBlueButton project is incorporating it into the core of BigBlueButton 2.6. So Steve, we're really, again, happy to have you here. We're really looking forward to your talk, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. I should have asked you this before. How do I share my screen?
Yeah, no worries. So if you see on the bottom kind of row of icons, the fourth one with the little screen there, slash across.
Okay, cool. All good. Perfect. Did not see it before. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for coming. Good to meet you. I am Steve Ruiz. I am the founder of tldraw, which began, well, we'll talk about its beginnings, but it is TL kind of stands for a tiny little drawing app. A little bit of a retcon, but that's what it stands for. I owned the domain. So what is tldraw? tldraw is, well, first off, who am I? I'm Steve Ruiz. You can follow me at Steve Ruiz OK on Twitter. And if you do, you'll see a lot of GIFs, a lot of things like this. I post a lot of development logs about tldraw and about all the little parts of tldraw, and especially about arrows. Kind of obsessed with arrows. So what is tldraw? tldraw is an open source virtual whiteboarding app. And you can visit it at tldraw.com. And yeah, it kind of looks like this. It's a place where you can create shapes and style them and change their colors and create arrows that connect to different things. And then those arrows update. And it's designed to be immediate, pop-up, it's free. There's no login, it's file-based. We have a Visual Studio Code extension, so you can use it, inside of your code editor if you're a developer. And it's also, as we'll see, it is multiplayer. So it is it's something that I am quite a big user of myself, but it's also it's just a great place for things to go, and we'll talk about more about what I mean by that. What we're looking at here is actually the next version of tldraw. So you might hear me refer to like a V1 and a V2, and this is that next version. It's got a couple of things that first version doesn't. It has a has a laser pointer to indicate things. Maybe I'll use that as we go. So tldraw has a couple of accolades. If you go to the to tldraw's GitHub repository, we're almost at 9,000 stars. That was a big one. We'll definitely have a 10K party, and we also made it once to the top of Hacker News. So we were there up at the top back when we launched in November. So proudest day of my life. So as I said, tldraw is multiplayer. If you want to try it, I think we can only have like 10 people at a time, but tldraw.com/r/BBBWorld. I made a little room. If you go there, you can you can see a couple of cursors here where other people are hanging out, and you might distract yourself during this talk by playing with tldraw itself. Again, it can only handle about 10 people at a time, but that is a more of a limitation of what we're using for multiplayer than the software itself. So back to tldraw. Where did it come from? This project grew out of a couple of different open source projects that I had. The kind of the closest ancestor would be this project called globs, which is at globs.design. And this was my first time working with a kind of a design interface where you had, all the things you would expect, like zooming and panning and dragging things. The only difference is that in globs.design, the only primitive you have, primitive in the sense of like, there's no rectangles or lines or anything. All you have is to work with is this sort of glob, which is two circles connected by two curves that hit them at their tangents, and you end up being able to make these strange shapes that can connect and look different ways. And I think if you hold spacebar, you see the silhouette. This was also a programmable kind of interface. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see some code. And that allowed you to do things like this, which you probably wouldn't do by hand, but is pretty easy to do with code. So maybe if, where's my radius here? It's 400, I could say 500 and then save it. And now it's a little bit bigger. So it'll just delete all the ones that I created with code and do it again. So this was another kind of very experimental mix of direct manipulation tool, like you have in Figma, versus a kind of a code-based tool that is a little bit different than anything that you probably have used before. It's a fun little experimental project, and it taught me a lot about building these type of like canvas UIs, and where you have a camera and you have a panning and zooming, selection, all that. So this was one of the ancestors, and the only reason I started working on that is because I worked on another project called Perfect Freehand. And if you are playing with the text tool in tldraw, this is using Perfect Freehand. What Perfect Freehand is a algorithm for creating a pressure sensitive or variable width line, where the line will be thicker if you're pressing hard with your device, or if you are moving slowly, and it'll go thinner if you move quickly, or if you're not pressing very hard with your device. And so this is a kind of a way of simulating digital ink. There's a whole bunch of fun levers that you can pull in terms of the size and in terms of like how that pressure is interpreted so how much should it thin or not thin, and then like how much should it adjust the line in order to smooth it out. I spent far too much time playing around with trying to get this all to work perfectly. So now I've set a taper on the whole line. So if I do a taper and kind of make it big, then you'll see this it's kind of shrinking as I write because it's getting thinner and thinner. Yeah. So this is also the URL is a little tricky, but it's if you look up Perfect Freehand, then you'll be able to find a link to that playground. It's also an open source library. You can take this and run with it and do whatever you want with it. There have been some cool projects that have used it. tldraw, the app, is available at tldraw.com. It's also distributed as a React component. So tldraw is something that you can put inside of any React project. So for example, I'm going to load up the code sandbox here, and we're not going to look too much at code, but you're going to see, this is where we're including the tldraw component inside of just a React app. We maybe give it an ID. There's some, obviously it's a complex React component, but it's still a React component. And it works just the way that you would expect it to, because on tldraw.com, we're just doing the same thing. We're embedding the app in tldraw.com. So you could use it anywhere, including in such famous apps as BigBlueButton. And what's maybe unique about tldraw as like an application, especially as like a drawing application, is that what you're looking at here is not it's not using fancy rendering technologies like WebGL or even like HTML Canvas if you're a developer. Essentially, this is like a normal website. This is a normal HTML and CSS website that just happens to interact like a canvas. So for example, this is the next version. So tldraw v2. Let me make a copy of this and drag it over here. One of the things you can do in tldraw v2 is, in addition to having these lovely Notion style links, is actually do iframes like you would in a normal website. So here we have the same code sandbox as before, but actually sitting on the canvas in tldraw. And I can, rotate this. I can, I can write on top of it if I wanted to. But I could also double click into it. And now I am actually editing the app and writing code here on the canvas, and it's just part of the app. It's part of the canvas. It's just a thing sitting on the canvas. But it is a fully interactive embedded website of code programming of tldraw. So a little bit of conception here, but you can imagine that having a DOM driven, like anything that you could do with a website, you could do on tldraw. And so barrier to entry, I suppose, as a developer who has an idea about like, I want to have something that looks and feels like Figma, but is actually for editing, I don't know, train tickets or creating lookbooks for clothing brands or whatever you want. That story is a lot easier to tell, or even to just imagine, when you can leverage React and HTML and CSS, technologies that are much less complicated to work in than whatever low-level graphics libraries, in order to create those things. And that's the whole idea of tldraw, is that it's this looks like a whiteboarding app. That's sort of the default mode of tldraw, but you could really use it to build anything. And especially this next version, I'm going to keep calling like V2, is a lot more designed with extension and extensibility in mind. Plus, it has a cool dark mode. So what do you get for free if you did want to build on tldraw or with tldraw? You get a lot of things for free. You get like this, what's going on here. That's a lot. What's even worse is like, this type of stuff where you're resizing or rotating shapes or snapping them, to each other. These are all interactions that are like really tricky, or like cloning, like so holding a button in order to create a clone of what you're dragging. Or we also now support like relative positioning. So being able to have a parent, that you can move that kind of has its children kind of sitting inside of it, which itself might be a child of another parent, which is, you get the idea. Kind of a nightmare. Undo, redo, copy and paste. The idea that you could put videos or GIFs or images right here on the canvas. These are all pretty hard problems that, well, I like to solve. But if I was just building an app where I wanted to do like a visual canvas for teachers and students to collaborate on memes or something, I wouldn't want to do all this stuff. I would probably just want to do the meme stuff. And then you also get, in addition to all like the hard kind of fundamental engine type of problems, well, you get a lot of details. This is sort of what I spend irrational amount of time on, so I'll show it off. Notice the corners on these dashed lines in this box. Notice how the dashes adjust just right so that they always hit at the corner. And as I resize it, they insist on just being at the corners. You don't have any kind of half dashes at the ends of the line. Or if you had an arrow, you can create multiple kind of points and curves within that arrow. And don't worry, the handles will always be in the middle of a dash, no matter what. And so you get a lot of, and I don't think you can see it probably on the video screen, but the cursors rotate as you rotate your cursor. or rotate the selection. And you can definitely not see it, but the shadows also rotate so that if here's the cursor and then there's the kind of the shadow behind it, that the shadow is always down and to the left, even if you're like, rotating it around here, it'll still be just right. Counter rotated cursor shadows. You're not going to build that yourself, but you get it for free with tldraw. So the idea here is to create something that anyone can use, either to build a whiteboarding app with all the things that you would expect to have in a whiteboarding app, or alternatively to take out all the parts that you don't need and put in only the parts that you do need, which could be just the pencil tool. It could be creating your own tools and your own shapes from scratch, and there are APIs to do that. Or it could be you want to start off with what you have kind of out of the box, all these tools and all these shapes and all this stuff. But just know that in the future, if you did want to develop against it, you could do so. You could extend it. You could take the things out that your users aren't into, or you could add them. And so that's what I'm expecting to see a little bit with BigBlueButton. Is that I doubt everything in tldraw is completely relevant, and I doubt that we've thought of everything that would be relevant. So I can imagine there being a future in terms of like what the application needs to do for BigBlueButton, but they're in a position to do it and to leverage their own developers to do it. So that is a really quicker than I expected it to be, introduction to tldraw and my involvement with that. It is a company, it is a team. We're based in London, but we're hiring and we're funded earlier this year, although we haven't announced yet. If you want to play with tldraw v1, I suppose, then you can go to tldraw.com. If you want to try out this one that I'm actually using right now, you can try that out at beta.tldraw.com. Again, we have not announced yet, so please don't, do whatever you want, but don't know that we haven't announced yet. So this is a kind of almost like a pre-beta beta. And then when we do announce, we will be doing it at tldraw.dev, which is going to be the new home for the kind of more developer-facing product. The idea of tldraw as a toolkit for other developers to be using to build their products. And meanwhile, I can be reached again at Steve Ruiz OK on Twitter. Or if you want to say hello, you can do so at steve@tldraw.com. And then if you wanted to follow tldraw itself, we are on Twitter at tldraw. And I think that's all my links, my big page of links here. So yeah, thank you. We do have time for questions, and I'm happy to take them. So let's see what the state of this is. All right, cool. It's doing pretty well. So I can stop sharing, and then I'll start sharing again if.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was an amazing presentation. There's a lot of depth to this platform and a lot of nuance to it, but it looks incredibly amazing. I'm sure a lot of people are they're impressed, to say the least, I think, in terms of what you've been doing and the team's been doing. So that was really awesome. So like Steve said, we have about 10 minutes or so before the next session begins. And so I think we can open that up to some questions. So if you want to go ahead and type that into the chat, Steve, I can field them out too. If you're keeping an eye out on the chat and you want to just answer them as they go along, that works as well. But we'd really encourage you guys to just throw out some questions if you have them. Yeah, right on. I'm just looking at the chat now. I'll try and field some. We have custom shape libraries. Yeah, that's definitely. If you're familiar with tldraw, I think at least the whiteboarding and diagramming story of tldraw. I've contributed to tldraw. They use my ink. I did their arrowheads. I'm a big fan of the product, and I love the kind of the custom shape libraries that they use. So I would love to see that in tldraw as well. Let's see, any plans to bring it to React Native? Sort of. Even though React or tldraw is rendering in React, at least the next version, the V2,
is much less married to React as a rendering solution. It's sort of render agnostic, meaning that the core logic of tldraw exists in a kind of like a pure JavaScript environment. It doesn't even need to know about the browser, but it is being rendered using React, and it's sending events back to that core using the browser. So we could, in theory, bring that same core to something like React Native and do the rendering using React Native instead. So I'm sure we'll have an experimental work or spike or something in React Native. I'd love to see it working in React Native. Let's see. Don't know. The question is, will BigBlueButton enable embedded websites in tldraw? Again, yeah, that's probably not a question for me. But I would like embedded websites in tldraw. Iframes in general, or like embedding websites inside of other websites, doesn't work perfectly. We will definitely have these like bookmarks, I suppose, are like really high value. And then I'm guessing we'll have a couple of whitelisted domains in tldraw for like this works as an embed. Not every website works as like an iframe or can be embedded in that way. So definitely more to work on there. The dependencies for this, dependencies are much thinner for the second version than for the first. We use live blocks for our multiplayer. We use Google Fonts for the fonts, Sentry for our own tracking. But when you use the component itself, not the whole website, tldraw.com, if you just wanted to use the React component, then you wouldn't necessarily have to bring in any of those other tools for yourself. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with BigBlueButton just to see what kind of features are needed by students in classrooms and sort of learning management or like learning software in general. We want this thing to be like usable and good for plenty of different domains and different kind of industries. Calling education an industry doesn't really feel right, but I guess it is, isn't it? But yeah, we want to make sure that the features support what students and teachers and facilitators and instructors and all that want to do. So yeah.
Got another question here from Bernhard saying, maybe I missed it, but will it be possible to reuse the whiteboard in different BBB sessions, like going on working with one whiteboard in the next session?
I think that's probably a question more for the BBB team. You can, I mean, it's really easy to copy content across, and there's no reason why like it's again, it's not an image, it's just sort of like a document. So there's no technical reason why that wouldn't be possible, but that would probably be up to the team. Yeah, like Fred said, or saying in the chat, like probably up to the team at BBB to implement. Is there a business model to fund the dev long-term for tldraw? With regard to funding and such, I mean, we're seed funded, so we're funded for the pretty well for seed funded. Long term, I think the idea is going to be to look at what teams that want to build with tldraw also need. So for example, multiplayer is a common requirement. A lot of teams that want to use tldraw also want to find a multiplayer solution. And so we're going to be working on our own multiplayer solution that teams can use, as well as like kind of a portable version of that you might use if you're, I don't know, a school or a hospital or somewhere where you need control over your whole data. You might pay us to license the like the collaboration multiplayer stack part of the product. Yeah, Miro is talking about libraries of primitives. Because you can you can, the next version is very, very like plugin and extension friendly. I'm hoping that there grows a kind of an ecosystem of especially domain specific, like chemistry teachers, developing shapes and developing kind of specific tools and things, plugins that make sense for that domain. And yeah, well, I hope it has a good open source future in terms of building those plugins and building those shapes and all that extra content. Cool. All right. I think that's it for me. Again, follow me on Twitter if you like arrows and want to follow along with the project. And then we are open source. We're at github.com/tldraw/tldraw. And yeah, it's going to be tldraw.dev to learn more about the product, or tldraw.com to use it. So thanks again to Fred and the team for building with tldraw and helping sponsor the project and inviting me over here.
Thank you so much, Steve. Again, we really appreciate having you participate. Really, really great session. Really, really interesting presentation, everything like that. And I'm sure everybody took a lot of stuff away. I know I definitely did. So big thanks to you.
Excellent. Cheers. Hope to see you using it.
Alrighty, sounds good. Well, thanks again, guys. We've gone ahead and we put in the link to the next session, which is with Maxim Klobistov and Anton Barbosa. And so we encourage you to go click the link, check that out, and we'll see you in there. Thanks again, Steve.
See you later.